The meeting minutes, any questions or comments? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion.
Move to approve. I move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. And are we doing this by hand signal today?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on to public comment, we have none. Moving on to review of draft board agendas. Robin Wapner, come on down.
Need to turn this on?
You don't
No.
have one.
Okay, good morning. I'm going to run through your draft agenda for the March 22nd board business agenda. So we have our standing approval of the meeting minutes, followed by public comments. And item number 3 is actually a new item that Chair Voss has asked that we add to the agendas, and I want to make sure to highlight this for our PAC chairs. We want to have an opportunity at each of our board meetings for the chairs of our policy advisory committees to have the opportunity to report out on any key items that you heard at your last meeting that we may not necessarily hear at the board level without your report. So this is an opportunity for you to just speak on anything that you think the board would be interested in at each of our board meetings. Item number 4 is our standing executive director's report, and then we move on to consent. So under consent, we have our standing policy advisory committee actions report. Item number 6, the approval of solicitations and contract awards. We're not expecting any on March 22nd, so this item likely will fall off of the agenda. Item number 7 is the 2020 Census Complete Count outreach. So the County of San Diego actually has asked that SANDAG help take the lead in coordinating the outreach efforts for the census for 2020. And so this is going to be an item coming to the board to ask for approval to do that work. Item number 8 is the Transnet Extension Ordinance Funding Eligibility Request. This will go through the TC first and then to the board for final approval. Item number 9 are funding recommendations for the Cycle 10 Specialized Transportation Grant Program. Again, this has gone through TC several times and then we'll go to the board for final approval. Items 10 and 11 are status updates on the implementation of recommendations. The first related to our first Transnet 10-year review, and the second related to the FY 2018 Transnet Triennial Performance Audit. And then item 12 is our 2019 Bike Month and Bike to Work Day. We'll just be asking the board to adopt a resolution recognizing May as Bike Month this year. And item 13 is our annual report related to activities undertaken by the SANDAG Criminal Justice Research and Clearinghouse section. Items 14 and 15 are our monthly reports on executive director delegated actions and meetings and events attended on behalf of SANDAG. That would close out the consent agenda and bring us to chair's reports. These are our 2 new recurring items to make sure the board is well apprised of what's going on, first on the regional plan and second on the work of the airport connectivity subcommittee. And then under reports, we'll have the draft FY 2020 program budget that the EC is considering today. Pending recommendation, it would go to the board on March 22nd. And item 19 is a project update on the State Route 11 Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. Item 20 is a closed session item related to the Midcoast project, and then we also may be adding another closed session item related to a recent claim we received due to a trip and fall near the SR 125 right-of-way. That would close out the draft agenda for March 22nd, unless there's any questions or comments. 22nd.
I just have a question of clarification on I guess the new item 3, the policy advisory committee chairs report. Is that like regional planning and traffic, or what? Okay, so it's all of it.
All of the PACs. Just the opportunity to report out if there's something substantive that
happened. Okay. Then I see also the chair's report on item, I guess there's 16 and 17.
And those are recurring items that fall under the chair's report in case Chair Voss would like to mention it or Hassan makes an update.
Oh, okay, your chair. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The chair.
Too many chairs.
All right. Yeah, so I'm wondering who's who. All right, thank you.
And then just quickly, I can let you know for April 12th, we didn't print a draft agenda. I think we're probably going to be bringing RENA to you. We're hoping to have made progress by then on some of the draft methodology that we'll be using for the RENA allocation, and so we would present any updates on that to the board on April 12th at your board policy meeting.
Robin, thanks. Thanks
you.
for getting through that so quickly.
Oh, sure, no problem.
This does need approval. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, a motion in a second, please. Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 4, draft fiscal year 2020 SANDAG program budget. Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. So Andre is going to go over with you and ask you to approve the draft budget Originally, we planned to have two requests. One is to get more money from Transnet, planning money, and get more money from TDA. After discussing this with our transit agencies, both MTS and NCTD, we think we need more time to discuss and figure out so there is no impact whatsoever to the transit agencies. So we're going to table those two parts, the Transnet and TDA discussion, and come back to you next time with potentially other mechanisms to do that. With that, I'm going to turn it to the team to go over the draft budget that we're asking you today to authorize distribution of and to recommend that the Board of Directors approve. Andre?
Thank you, Hassan. Good morning, members of the committee. So at your last executive committee meeting, for the first time, we presented the draft 20 program budget. At that time, we highlighted the areas of emphasis and strategic goals, and we reviewed the current funding expectations and looked at some of the highlights for each of the programs. Today's report will touch on those items. In addition, we'll give an update on the staffing resources, the contingency funds, and the Section 115 update. So in my opinion, this was one of the most exciting retreats that I've attended, and obviously we had some great presenters with great ideas. So although we're presenting you with a balanced budget today, what Hassan says is true, and in the future we'll definitely need to have some more financial resources. And so that's why I'm joined today here by Ray, Muggs, and the other Ray, to kind of talk about some of the programs that we'll be needing to initiate in the future in order for us to proceed with some of the big visions and some of the strategic goals that I think the board's going to be adopting. So the budget in front of you today is $1.36 billion with the capital program, administration program, operating. For the most part, they're the same size and scope as last year. However, the overall work program, or the OWP, which is our planning program, is proposed to increase by approximately 21%. Approximately two-thirds of that is dedicated funding, so the funding is taken care of okay through dedicated projects. However, approximately a third of that is flexible funding, which is a more difficult funding for us to receive. Now, a portion of that funding will be taken care of from our recurring revenues that we have from both federal, state, and local resources. However, as I mentioned, there's limited funding opportunities for planning and personnel efforts, and so we're proposing an increase in our member assessments. So SANDAG member assessments have remained unchanged since 2003, and the fiscal year 20 budget proposes a 100% increase and adding an annual CPI adjustment going forward. These assessments fund a variety of ongoing expenses that we have, including board compensation and costs, providing matching dollars to some grant funding, and in addition, based on the new AB 805, the Independence Performance Auditor, and also we have increased governmental relations efforts. Attachment 6 actually shows what each of the increases will be to each on our member agencies. We're also proposing the use of $1.3 million of our contingency funds to continue the airport connectivity project, the big data initiative, and the expanded transportation modeling to support the regional plan. Now, the contingency reserve does allow the use of reserve funds to advance urgent, high-priority needs for the agency, and after expending the $1.3 million, our balance becomes $4.5 million, which is below the 10% threshold that is set by board policy. However, we're confident that we'll be able to get the grant fund for the airport connectivity, and as well as we'll probably have some salary savings in 2019. So we're confident by the end of this calendar year that we'll get above the 10% level again. Chapter 12 of your program budget shows all the other contingencies for capital, operations, and administration budget, but we don't have any significant changes to those. So with the increase in the member assessments and contingency funds, we have a balanced budget. And so now I'll turn it over to my colleagues who will describe the future financial resources are a must. Starting with Ray.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Ray Trainer, your Director of Operations. And I just wanted to kind of take from what Andre talked about. You know, we've been undertaking this real recalibration of SANDAG to help you implement this bold vision that we're starting to define yesterday as you started looking at the strategic plan. And to be able to implement that bold vision, we really got to try to realign the organization from an information technology perspective. And so to do that, there's some core IT capabilities that we need to go through and make some enhancements to really try to underpin what we're really calling a digital transformation, not only of the agency itself, but really the region's transportation system. And so to do that, we're going to be looking to you to be able to help provide some guidance on this, but really what we're looking at is we've got some antiquated systems. You know, we heard from Oliver Ratzesberger that a lot of the Fortune 100 and 500 companies that his firm consults with has a lot of data in silos, and really SANDAG, and I think many of the organizations here at the table have some similar things where you've got data in silos. And so for us, it's trying to extract that data and be able to make better informed decisions to help you really actually as decision makers with that. And so as part of the program budget proposal, we've got some upgrades to our existing IT systems, our software capabilities, as well as helping to improve staff to increase their skill sets. And really what we're trying to do is four things. It's really to integrate and standardize our IT systems that would eliminate those data silos that I talked about, improve our team collaboration, our ability to try to increase our productivity and our coordination. The second thing is really providing you with better information. You're the decision makers, and so we've got a number of solutions there. One that many of you around the table have asked us to support you, and that's in the area of micromobility. And so we've actually been working with you, many of your city attorneys, to put together a data sharing effort where we can actually get some efficiencies as we collect the micromobility data from each of those service providers on your behalf, and then turn back to you a set of analytics that can help you understand how these systems are actually performing in your city, whether those organizations are actually conforming with the guidelines that are set forth in the ordinances that you're actually starting to make. The other third thing we're trying to do is to reduce costs, right? It's about trying to get more efficiency, to try to eliminate the redundancies that we find. And so that's really the third tenet. And then the last tenet here, we talked about trying to create a platform of innovation. You know, we've been hearing a lot about big data. And one of the promises that big data really provides is this opportunity now to put data together to try to obtain new insights and to understand patterns, movement patterns of individuals, movement patterns around the region to help us really now start to isolate and focus on problem solving. And so those are really the underlying themes that we're bringing forth as we start to think about the revamping of the IT system. And what we're talking about now is really a portfolio of projects. And so what's contained in the proposed fiscal year 20 budget are some sort of fundamental improvements. This would be really a modern IT platform dealing with things like better data management, bringing some business intelligence focus to that data, helping us actually visualize and bring back to you clearer, more compelling understanding about what we're seeing in that data, enterprise security, document management, as well as invoice management and improvement in the way that we handle our financial reporting. And so those are really the areas that we've got highlighted for fiscal year 20, but that portfolio of work really goes beyond. These projects many of them are multi-year in nature, and so this would be a portfolio that we would be bringing back to you each year over the course of the next several years as we start to undertake that transformation. So I'll turn it over to Muggs to continue on the planning and the work we're doing to work on the big vision and the regional plan.
Good morning. I think they put me between the two Rays to, avoid confusion here. It's something Ray Muggs, Ray. So, anyway, building on what Ray Trainer said, putting the systems in place to bring efficiency and the tools that we need to do the work in front of us. What we've been talking about for the 2+ days here is the new regional plan, and the fact that this is going to be this update and the action that was taken by the board on the 22nd is resulting in the biggest planning effort we've ever done in this agency. And so we're going to need the support of new IT systems to be able to do that, and because we're going to be developing and designing new transportation systems that the region has never seen before. And that's going to mean that we need to kind of realign our own teams within the organization. We're going to need to bring in thought leaders that can help us develop some of these latest technologies. Some of the people you saw yesterday with, on the afternoon panel, we're going to need to bring in those kinds of folks to help us develop the new ideas. We're going to need new, besides the IT underpinning that Ray Traynor was talking about, we're going to need new tools that Ray Major is going to talk about in terms of doing the required analysis, the analysis that's required by both the state and federal laws that guide transportation planning. And so all of that is going to be needed in order to develop this new plan that's going to be right in line with the strategic planning effort we talked about yesterday. So everything that we've been talking about here the last couple of days. The other major effort that you're going to hear a lot about today, obviously, is that affects the planning within the organization is the airport connectivity work that we're doing. Again, this is a big opportunity for the region, and in terms of addressing ground transportation to the airport, obviously that's a big part of what that effort is doing, but it's doing so much more in terms of establishing, a new major transportation hub and to encourage redevelopment in that area and really trying to link land use and transportation and connecting that to the rest of the region. So these are big efforts that are going to take a lot of different ways of looking at things and bringing in resources to help us get that done. So that's just a quick summary of what we're going to be doing in the planning department that contributes to the budget that we're here talking to you about today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ray Major to talk about some of the tools.
Thank you. Over the past 2 days, we heard a lot about big data. We heard about disruptive technologies that are here today, things like the scooters, and then we heard about things that may be coming in the future. And so what I'm talking about is focused simply on the things that are really happening now and may be included in the regional plan. So this doesn't include the data, the big data and the data science things that we've talked about before. So that's not where these efforts are that I'm going to be speaking about. But when we take a look at this plan, we have a tool or a model that we use to calculate things like greenhouse gas emissions. We calculate vehicle miles traveled. We help the city of San Diego, for instance, with their climate action plan and other cities, too, to figure out what the mode share is. And what's fundamentally happened in the past couple of years is that these disruptive technologies have created new ways of getting around. And some of the ones that we've heard are things like Uber and Lyft. So those are fallen under what's called TNCs, or transportation network companies. And that's a reality now of the way people get around. We don't have a model for TNCs, for instance, embedded within our ABM model, primarily because we were getting ready for this planning cycle that we were working on, and they really were in their nascent form when we started doing the data collection and analysis. But as we move forward with the regional plan that includes different forms of transportation, we need to be able to model those so that we can see what the impact is going to be on things like greenhouse gas emissions, so that we can take credit with that and we can show the ARB that we're doing what we need. Also, the connected autonomous vehicles. That's another thing, very complicated thing for us to model, but it's something that we're going to have to put in there because that's looking like it's going to be a reality within the planning horizon also. When we take a look at some of the things they talked about with, for instance, mobility as a service, where we have these shared automobiles, all of a sudden you have automobiles that you don't necessarily own, so it may not be parked at your house and it may not be parked at your work because it leaves. We have to rethink how we actually model that. We'll need to work with consultants to get that type of information and to see what impacts there are. Excuse me. Things like the Hyperloop. Things like micromobility with the scooters. How those actually impact will require us to do new surveys. People who are really writing those, in many cases, are the ones who adopt these changes the quickest, are college-age students. We really need to do a survey that specifically talks to college-age students to understand how they get around and how they plan to get around in the future, because those are the ones that will be shifting and growing into the 20, 30, 40, 50 regional plan. And then finally, the parking study needs to be redone also. And primarily because, for instance, if I have now an autonomous vehicle instead of taking it to work and parking it in the parking lot, I could send it somewhere else to park, or I could send it home to take my kid to school. All of a sudden, this vehicle moves around completely differently than vehicles that we're used to today. So understanding how all this stuff works together is going to take us time, and it's also going to take us money in terms of staffing and consulting dollars to get it in so that we can show what the benefits are of the new regional plan. So I can give you details on any of these in terms of why it would be as complex as it is to put in, but I think I'd just like to conclude by saying that we need a set of models that support this regional plan so that we can really see what the impact is of coming up with a transformational transportation system. And with that, I'll hand it back to Andre.
Great, thank you guys. So as part of this, we're also doing an organizational assessment that I think you heard of yesterday to help with some of the initiatives going forward, and this is something that we'll also bring back to the board at a later date. Now, as far as this budget, the directors considered the staffing resources that they need for the year ahead, and there were new positions added to support planning and capital development, as well as regional services and businesses. Also, a compensation study was done in the past year, and salary ranges are proposed to increase by 5% to bring them up to competitive rates. And a 4% compensation adjustment pool is proposed to support the agency's Pay for Performance program. Now, we established the Section 115 Trust back in fiscal year 2017 as a means for saving for future pension costs. To date, we've made contributions of $6.1 million. And if you were to take the money in the trust that we've saved so far, along with CalPERS, our funded ratio currently is 71%. And an additional $1 million is proposed to be added to the Section 115 Trust with this budget. When we come back to you during the final budget, we'll kind of do a closer look at the actuarial analysis that was done in 2017 and how we're tracking to date. And there are no changes recommended to the employee benefits program. So our next steps is today the Executive Committee is asked to, 1, authorize distribution of the draft fiscal year 20 budget to the funding agencies, and 2, recommend that the Board of Directors approve the draft fiscal year 20 program budget and authorize distribution of the document to member agencies and other interested parties for review. At the March 22nd board meeting, there will be more detailed presentation to the board on the highlights of the 20 program. At that meeting, I'll be joined by all my fellow directors who will give presentations on their particular programs and how the departments help for us to accomplish the goals set by the board. And on May 10th, the Executive Committee is scheduled to review the proposed final budget, which will include comments received from the funding agencies, member agencies, and the public. Consistent with SANDAG bylaws, final board approval is scheduled for May 24th. And at this point, that concludes our presentation, and certainly we're available for questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hassan.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things for the board members. This budget will fulfill our requirement of hiring an internal auditor, which we did. Depend whether that independent auditor will require staff or not, we will see. But big part of the increasing the membership dues was to pay for the auditor. This budget will bring the staff to market. There is few positions that are below market, and that's not a big cost. That's about $110,000. This budget, as it stands today, will not do everything that Ray T. and Ray M. and Muggs talked about. We're going to be discussing with you later how we're going to bring more budgets to do that. Now, some of you might ask the question, okay, well, did we look internally, and is there efficiencies to begin? And I absolutely think there is. But we have to move forward and develop the regional transportation plan in the deadline we said. We have to move and develop the tools. I can't say, give me a year, let me look internally and figure out where these efficiencies are. But eventually that will happen. naturally that will happen. We're going to look through the strategic planning process and how we structure it, how we do business, what our business model is. But everything you heard from your staff today, this is not, just asking money to ask for money. This is money that we need to fulfill our obligation as a metropolitan planning organization, as a regional transportation planning agency, as your regional agency. I guarantee you this, that if in a year we figure out efficiencies and we have more money, we'll come back and say, okay, let's put that money back. But as of now, that's what we're recommending you do. There is a deadline to meet here. The funding agencies have to receive this budget. We have to get approval by June 30th. And to do that, we have to finalize the draft by April 1st, I believe. Today, we're asking you to move this to the agency. This is not a final say on the budget. The final say will be when the board have a final budget to approve. And with that, my team and I are happy to take questions.
Thank you, Hassan. I have 3 speakers on this item. First, Annabelle Aras. Do we have a microphone for these folks? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Anna Barals. I'm a business rep at IBEW Local 465, and we proudly represent over 200 members at MTS Transit and Trolley. We are concerned to see a proposal in the budget to cut funding to our transit agencies. As our region looks to address climate change, equity, and invest in good quality jobs in the region, we need to invest in our transit agencies and transit workers. On behalf of our members and local, we would like to thank you for tabling to not reduce public funds to MTS at this time. We look forward to partnering with you and working with you on this matter in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Gretchen Newsom.
Thanks,
Good morning.
Annabelle. Good morning. Okay, so Gretchen Newsom with IBW 569, the sister local to 465. So I represent the 3,400 unionized electricians that go and build the giant projects that all of you are going to be building in the near future. So we've advocated that the investment of our public dollars should be done in a social and environmentally equitable manner to build a vibrant and inclusive economy that lifts up families, creates healthier communities, and addresses climate change. And during this retreat, you have spearheaded the opportunity to right the ship and head in a new direction with a bigger, bolder plan for a brighter future. We've reviewed the proposed budget, and we see many bright spots, like the airport connectivity. And we're also thankful to see the new climate action planning program and hope that this initiative will grow and benefit our local communities and cities to meet our climate action goals. Additionally, we see Sandag continuing to invest resources in electric vehicle planning, and we were enthusiastic partners in your EV working group. And as we've noted in prior comments to the board, we look forward to collaborating with you to make sure that these EV charging units are installed safely and correctly through the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. We were concerned to see the reductions in the Transportation Development Act funds for our transit agencies, because now is the time to be doubling down on mass transit and helping our transit agencies grow. So we're very thankful to see that this matter has been tabled to allow for more discussion. And finally, we're hopeful that more mass transit, biking, and walking projects will be vigorously pursued and prioritized in both your vision and your decision making. The time is now to be bold and progressive, and we're here to partner with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Tony Krantz.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Tony Krantz, Board Chair of NCTD, and I've enjoyed the last couple of days the opportunity to get to know some of you better and participate in the exercises that we've been doing on this retreat. This morning on the way to my car to put my suitcase in, I ran across a dime in the parking lot that I picked up. And I still pick up coins as I pass them on the street, but it reminded me a little bit about what it's like to be on a board of a transit agency, because we're looking for every dime we can get. And the idea that there would be adjustments made to the funding sources to NCTD and MTS is pretty painful and unacceptable. So I appreciate the fact that it's been tabled and that you are committed to working with our CEOs to find ways to make it revenue neutral, because we need every dime. We just recently adjusted our fares in order to try and recover from some of the transit ridership issues, the declines that we're seeing, and it's painful to our ridership. So we cannot work with this any less from our MPO. So it's important that we get to the point where your budget is revenue neutral as it relates to our budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, folks, for being here. We'll move to board comments, questions. Mr. Wells.
First up, well, thank you for such a nice retreat. It's been perfect, except for the fact I lost a dime this morning. And
We found it.
yeah. Listen, I'm going to say something that's going to sound oppositional right now. I don't mean it to be, but I've got to bring it up. You're asking to increase our member assessments. This is right after AB 805 has basically taken away my city's and many other cities' efficacy in this board whatsoever. Anything that we vote on can be overridden. And before you say that that's not anybody's fault, because that happened at the legislature level, it's that option, that what I consider a nuclear option, has already been used 3 times on variously minor things. So my question is to anybody is, why should I be interested in assessing more fees to my city when we virtually have no representation?
I will answer the question this way. As far as we're concerned, you still have representation, you still have a seat at the table, and 805 is 805. We're not going to hamper in the past, we're going to move forward. I hope we will still continue to move as a unit, making decision for the great county we live in. So second, and 805 is the law of the land, and that I cannot say much. Second, why should any city pay more dues? You should expect a lot in return. You should expect this agency to do. It's been doing a lot for their member cities and counties. It will do more. And we're going to work our hardest to bring more resources to the city, give cities more resources. In this case, we are in a situation where we have new requirement we have to pay for. And the color of money is important here. The whole discussion with our transit agency, and just for the record, we would never want to, I said that several times to the board already, I am not the kind of person who would recommend taking anything from transit agents but give them. And the idea was to look at revenue neutral, color of money issues. For example, there are certain monies we cannot use for planning. There are certain monies we cannot use for lobbying or public relations. There are certain monies we cannot use to pay the internal auditors. We have to use certain color of money. So the assessment dues are that kind of money. But it goes without saying that dues that hasn't been increased in 2003, it's still relatively low compared to the dues everybody else pays. And I am guaranteeing, these are facts, we can give you facts, that every city gets much more than what it pays in dues from your MPO, and you should. So these are the answers. As to 805, it is the law of the land, and that's that.
Just to make it clear, I don't have any problem with the increase in the dues. I think it goes to a good cause. I'm using it as an opportunity to point out the fact that the cities often do feel completely disenfranchised by this. And it's not just the law of the land. Somebody in this group has to enact it. They have to bring it to the table. They have to use the nuclear option. And I would encourage my friends from San Diego and Chula Vista to think about that before enacting it, because there's a lot of belief that the cities have been completely disenfranchised. You're going to want tax increases in the future. You're going to want fee increases in the future, and I don't think you're going to want the cities to not be championing those causes. And a good way to get us not to do that is not to use that nuclear option.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks.
Jim.
A couple of questions, and
Can we get these microphones on here?
It's on. It's on. The green light's on. I share with Mayor Wells' frustration on the fees and I guess the voting here at Sandag. Ray, pick a Ray, any Ray. I heard the term micro-mobility. It's the first time I heard that term. What does that mean?
So this would be like the discussion you heard yesterday afternoon talking about scooters, bicycles, shared bikes, electric bikes. All of those are considered micromobility, even things like neighborhood electric vehicles. So these are low speed, sometimes personal, sometimes multi-passenger vehicles that are helping to solve sort of this first and last mile transportation problem.
And you realize a third of the county is unincorporated and probably will never be using these in the future.
Yeah, but as we heard yesterday, there's just an increasing popularity among these, and I think what's our response has been many of the cities around the table have actually asked us to help them really two areas. One is to develop a common and consistent ordinance to help them as they guide the implementation and operations of these new services. And then secondly is to be able to collect the data and then deliver a set of data services back to the cities to help them both in the regional planning as well as in public works and operations to make sure that each of the service providers are actually conforming with the ordinances.
I get that we should help them, but we
Yeah.
should also help people in other areas of the county as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And this was just meant to be an example of just one of the things we're working toward.
Okay, thank you. And then, Hassan, okay, so I'm just curious that you started out with, we're going to leave the TDA alone and we're not going to take the 1% from Transnet.
No. For now, we're going to table it to discuss with our transit agencies a way to get.
So you're tabling it for now. So how does that, was that already, I guess I don't know if the word is baked, was that already part of,
No.
I noticed that's like $7 million.
No. It's
So
not
that
part.
wasn't part of the
Correct.
budget that's been in
Correct.
front
The
of us
budget
today.
in front of you does not include that.
Okay. And then, do we have a policy on when we go below our 10% of how low we go? Or how can we go? Or do we have to get back up to that 10% before we go back to that bucket? I don't know if we have a policy in place for that.
Yeah, so we do have a board policy 30, and it specifically says that 10% is our target. And if we go below that target, we have to have a plan to get above that. And I think we do have a plan. Like I mentioned, currently for the airport connectivity project, we have almost a $500,000 grant that we expect to get from Caltrans, hopefully in the next month or so. In addition, usually we don't have 100% of employment in our staff, so there's some salary savings. So between those two, I think we have a plan that by the end of this calendar year, we should be back above that 10% level.
Okay, thank you. And then just a comment on the airport connectivity planning. I'm not going to vote against this whole thing because of that, but on the airport connectivity planning, I noticed for 2020 we're already starting engineering and design, and we don't even have a concept yet. And yesterday in the news, and even Hassan, thanks for letting us know, we're $9 billion short on 15 projects, 14 of which are road projects. And it just seems, the perception to me is we're moving ahead with this airport mobility with engineering and design ahead of all the other projects without really having a clear RTP in place.
So we're not moving ahead to any project.
Well, engineering and design
You already make a decision to do conceptual framework by June. You funded that.
True.
We're doing just that. We are putting in the budget in case in June you come back with the conceptual framework and you say move forward. Then we have something in the budget. I have no doubt in my mind that the board members, all of you, not the 805 stuff, but all of you board members would agree that this is a project that we need to pay for. Now, it's not part of the Transnet. It's not part of it.
Okay.
And at later time, if you're going to have to discuss whether you're going to put it back on the Transnet. But right now, we're moving forward like things are going to move the way we talked to you about. And that's how the budget is reflected.
Okay, but the regional plan that's in place, there's also several projects in there that we all agreed to move forward.
Sure.
So I just want to make the point, this one's going ahead of the rest at this point.
No project right now. We did not set priorities, sir. You're going to set that priority.
Mayor Salas. Thank you very much. And we have a very exciting opportunity in front of us because we're really approaching our regional transportation plan. a lot differently. And I think that, while it was a pretty tough decision for us to make to push the date forward, certainly, making sure that we get a plan that's really functional, that's really realistic, is very, very important. So, and that we're going to have a lot of new changes, a lot of new data systems purchased in order for us to get the correct information to do this. And listening to your presentations, that you need additional resources and talent to get us there. But I'm a little concerned when I hear that we're not making it a priority, or it didn't seem to me that we were making a priority of looking internally first for efficiencies to make sure that we are operating as lean as we can, because I didn't get a clear idea, first of all, of how many consultants that we would need to hire to accomplish what we need to accomplish, and how many permanent employees that we would need. And I think that I need a clearer understanding of that.
Any further comment or question? Catherine?
Yeah. Let me to respond to Mayor Salas. A couple of things on the internal efficiencies. My highest priority, no question about it. We are gonna look at it and look at it and look at it and make sure that whatever model we deploy between staff and consultant. If we have places where there's more staff, we will trim. If they have places where we need to complement staff work, we will do that. That process cannot be done in a week or so. We have a deadline to meet in the budget, but that's the highest priority for me, especially when we started yesterday talking about the strategic plan. Strategic plan is all about strategically positioning ourselves and structuring ourselves to do the right work. So that's a high priority. No question about it. The question is how many staff positions do we need, and what kind of consultants do we need? You heard from the team this morning, and that will depend on the discussion. We're going to come back to you of where we get additional planning resources. Right now, I couldn't tell you exactly what we need, but I can tell you for sure none of the stuff that Muggs, Ray, and Ray talked about is funded right now or had the resources to be done. We couldn't ask our team right now at Sandag to do any of the stuff that they talk about because these are new things. We couldn't ask our existing models to do what these new things are. In the next few weeks, before the budget is finalized, we will know exactly where we're bringing the resources, what kind of consultant, how many staff, what kind of reduction, if we know before the finalization of the budget in some areas we're going to do. But all of this is, to me, a high priority to look at being lean and mean and restructuring. I think moving this budget would allow us to do that and come back to you. By the way, we can amend the budget anytime during the year. So if I arrive in August to the fact that we have some efficiencies to begin, I'll come back to you and maybe we repay some of the contingency funds. But right now I couldn't tell you exactly because the budget discussion is still going and how to bring additional resources.
Thank you, Hassan. Catherine.
I wasn't going to, just going to comment. Thank you for those comments. I wanted to just reinforce the importance of that. I think Mayor Salas brought it up really nicely, and it's very hard to believe that after 100 days that our executive director really has an ability to understand the whole agency and where efficiencies could be found. I know in our own city it's very painful to make changes in direction, and as an agency, if we're going in a different direction, which we clearly are, it seems that we will need to be making some staffing changes, and I think there probably will be redundancies and efficiencies and places where we need to be looking really closely at that. I think it can be easier for staff to ask electeds for more money than it is to cut. And so recognizing the painful work of that is something that I think is really important that we do as an agency, because we don't want to be an agency that's considered bloated or redundant or really overstaffed for what we're trying to accomplish. And I have always had the impression that Sandag is considered a leader in terms of data. So now if we're going in this additional big data direction, it seems like people can be repositioned in those ways, and it doesn't have to just be additive and additive and additive. So I just want to go on the record as saying I think that's a key thing, and I hope within a year of you being here in this role as the executive director, you're able to do some of that analytic work to figure out what is the right sizing of this agency given the new directions that we want to be going.
Georgia.
Yeah, thank you. And I first want to thank Hassan and staff for creating this draft proposal and acknowledging the tabling of the adjustments to what it could have been money reshuffling from transportation, from transit to meet the needs. So I'm appreciative of that. I'm looking forward and seeing how those conversations move forward in a way that it's not going to impact any other agencies. Having said that, definitely supportive of the overall adjustment request. I get that. I think some of us have said that we get that. We need to plan for where we're going and create a team to help us meet that movement. Definitely very supportive and seeing what changes too if we are moving in that direction. We gotta not be doing what we were doing in previous years. So that means those departments or the staffing that needs to change as well. So I definitely want to see that sooner rather than later. I know that there's a million things happening, but I think that's really critical in terms of looking at this. One of the things that I really would like to see, and I don't know if it's in the document, if it is, do let me know where it is. The request for the salary adjustments, and I get that we need to be competitive. I'm supportive of that, but I want to see what the rationale is and what the studies were. I don't know if there was a salary survey done, and if so, I've not seen that. And like I said, it might be in the document, so I don't know if that's available.
Yes. Council President, it is available. I will ask Laura and Melissa to provide. There were a market survey done, and what that market survey is an average. The ranges of our staff are below the market, and not being like 75th, just below the market. And to bring that up to market, there is few positions that you need to adjust the lower range, which is about 110,000 agency-wide. So we'll have Laura send you that information. It's available.
Okay.
To your point, go ahead, sorry.
No, and I appreciate that, and perhaps there's a future conversation, because I think we all work with staff, and we all want to bring them up to competitive salaries. The city of San Diego wants to do that, but we have a money challenge, so we got to have a policy in terms of stepping up to be able to do it, not just let's just go for the max. So I don't know if that's the approach. And if that's not the approach, perhaps there should be a conversation on how we approach this discussion versus just inserting it, and this is what we want to do. So I think approach is really critical, and I'm not aware if there is such policy related to salaries or what was the thinking behind that.
Yeah, I can actually
and I know it's very
that.
little too.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to drum on something like that.
And I'd be happy to meet more also after this if we want to go into more detail. But generally, when we look at our compensation studies, we're looking at our ranges only, not the individuals necessarily at that point. So these range adjustments are not for every single individual. The 110,000 that Hassan is referring to are those that fall below ranges that we need to bring them up into where they need to be. But the ranges themselves are what we're looking at in terms of market. And then we do have a plan internally to look at individuals based on their performance, based on how long they've been in the role, et cetera, and stepping them up into market. But that's more of a multi-year plan because we don't always have the budget to do that when we want to do that.
Maybe that's a future discussion as well, just so we're all aware of. And and I'm supportive of this, and I know it's very little in comparison to the overall changes. So I don't want to put more emphasis on that.
I just want to one thing, one point you made. I totally agree with them, both you and the vice chair made. And I led the agencies before, and I did the same. I don't believe any agency should resort to when you have resources, you should just add resources and worry later about the resources you have. This is an exercise we're going through right now. I promise you, before even a year end, you will see a lean and mean organization. We'll see no duplication, and you will be even more proud of how we deliver projects. One thing that's important to say is I know that every public agency in need of funds to bring their employees to market, not above market, but to market. I will tell you though the stuff that especially the two Rays talked about. You know, you have to compete with private industry here. And if you're, I mean, let us face it, if you're not going to be able to offer people to come from the Google and Apple of the world to work for you in this micro-mobility and this data and big data, you're not going to succeed. And you would agree that our interest is not just to add staff, but to add staff that are qualified to do the job. So I think some discussion have to take place about how do we be competitive with the private sector in some of these areas. And I agree it's a tough position because every public agency suffers from the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's always going to be a constant challenge in the government agencies. We're not going to have enough money to ever compete with the private sector. So there's a medium, right? So I'm not a believer that we are competing with the private sector as a public agency. So we just have to be cautious about that.
Absolutely.
And then just lastly, in relation to the request to ask the member agencies to increase the what were we calling it, the membership increase. I actually do think that it's time to evaluate that, and I'm checking in with the rest of our staff at the city to see if that's something that is doable. But I do believe right now the way that it's being presented, it's not a big hit, it's not a big request. It hasn't been done in several years. I do think that it is something that is reasonable ask and supportive of. Yeah, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jones. And can we get a microphone down to Rebecca?
Yeah, I don't
Sorry about that. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what that has been said. But one of the things that we run a very lean staff in San Marcos. Before our city manager comes to us and says, "Oh, you know, I need another person in this area or that area," there's this analysis that's done in every single department that really defines. This is why we need a new person because we, of this reason, and these are all the jobs that they're going to have. I mean, it's rather extensive. I'm a little uncomfortable, again, back to our resources, because when people look to us, we're the decision makers that are, we have our tax dollars that we have to protect. And just looking at the big picture, I'm a little uncomfortable with the speed of how this is going. I am, however, back to, I didn't mention it previously, the transit agencies that we're not just going to be taking away from them because we just did, raise the fares, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But anyway, we're tabling that. We're looking at that again. But back to looking at new positions, I like Georgette, would like to see the class and comp study. But also, making sure that we are very sure it's going to take a year to look at how can we justify to the public and to the people that we're responsible to that we're adding all these new jobs without actually having, all of the information of why exactly we need these jobs. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I'm very conservative financially. I try to run this like I would my own business, and so I just think it's very important to look at back to the every dime thought process.
Thanks, Rebecca. Georgette.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the motion to move this.
Thank you, Georgette. Let me just add that I think there has been outstanding discussion here this morning with important points brought up from everybody that has spoken. And it's critical that we continue this discussion at the board level to flesh out all of the arguments and figure out where we should go. So I appreciate the discussion, and I'll be happy to second the council president's motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We are going to forego hearing the legislative status report today. Robin, sorry. Upcoming meeting, we all know, April 12th. Thank you all for being here at this early hour. We will adjourn.